The Amritsar Massacre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Speech given by Winston Churchill to the House of Commons, 8th of July, 1920. I think it may make for the convenience of the debate if I speak at this early period in the 5 p.m. afternoon, in order to put the committee in possession of the views taken by the War Office, and to offer a full explanation of the course they have adopted. I shall certainly endeavour to follow very carefully the advice which my right honourable friend who has just spoken has given, that we should approach this subject in a calm spirit, avoiding passion, and avoiding attempts to excite prejudice, that we should address ourselves to the subject with a desire to do today what is most in accordance with the long view of the general interests of the British Empire. There has not been, I suppose, for many years a case of this kind, which has raised so many grave and wide issues, or in regard to which a right and wise decision is so necessary in the general interest. There is the intensity of racial feeling which has been aroused on both sides of India. Every word we speak ought to have regard to that. There are the difficulties of military officers who, in these turbulent times, have been or are likely to be called upon to handle their troops in the suppression of civil disturbance. There are the requirements of justice and fair play towards an individual. There are the moral and humanitarian conceptions which are involved. All these, combined, make the task of the government and of the committee one of exceptional seriousness, delicacy, and responsibility. I will deal first with the action of the Army Council, for which I accept full responsibility. The conduct of a military officer may be dealt with in three perfectly distinct spheres. First of all, he may be removed from his employment or his appointment, relegated to half pay, and told that he has no prospects of being employed again. This may be done to him by a simple administrative act. It is sufficient for the competent superior authority to decide that the interests of the public service would be better served if someone else were appointed in his stead, to justify and complete the taking of such a step. The officer in question has no redress. He has no claim to a court or inquiry or a court-martial. He has no protection of any kind against being deprived of his appointment, and being informed that he has no further prospects of getting another. This procedure may seem somewhat harsh, but a little reflection will show that it is inevitable. There is no excuse for superior authority not choosing the most suitable agents for particular duties, and not removing unsuitable agents from particular duties. During the war, as every member of the committee knows, hundreds, and probably thousands, of officers have been so dealt with by their superiors. And since the war, the tremendous contraction of the army has imposed similar hardships on hundreds, and possibly thousands, of officers against whom not one word of reproach could be uttered, and whose careers in many cases have been careers of real distinction and of invariable good service. This applies to all appointments in the army, and I have no doubt in the navy too, and it applies with increasing severity in proportion as the appointments are high ones. from the humble lance corporal, who reverts to private by a stroke of the pen, from the regimental adjutant, if the colonel thinks he would prefer some other subaltern, up to the highest general or field marshal, all officers are amenable to this procedure in regard to the appointments which they hold. The procedure is well understood. It is hardly ever challenged. It is not challenged by General Dyer in his statement. It is accepted with soldierly fortitude, because it is believed, on the whole, that the administration of these great responsibilities is carried out in a fair and honest spirit. Indeed, when one thinks of the hundreds of officers of high rank who, in the last year, have had their professional careers brought abruptly and finally to a close, and the patience, good temper, and dignity with which this great personal misfortune has been borne, one cannot help feeling a great admiration for the profession of arms to which those officers belong. That is the first method by which military officers may be dealt with. Under it, the officer reverts automatically to half pay, and, in a very large proportion of cases, having reverted to half pay, he applies to be placed on retired pay, because, especially in the case of senior officers, retired pay is often appreciably higher than half pay. I now come to the second method. The second method is of a more serious character, and it affects not the employment of an officer, but his status and his rank. Here it is not a question of choosing the right man for a particular job, but of retiring an officer compulsorily from the service, or imposing on him some reduction or forfeiture in his pension or retired pay. In this case, the officer is protected, under Article 527 of the Royal Warrant, by the fact that it is necessary for 3 members of the Army Council to approve the proceeding, and by certain rights of laying his case before them. All the same, the Secretary of State for the time being, by virtue of his office, has the power to make a submission direct to the Crown, and advise that an officer be retired compulsorily, or simply that his name be removed from the list, His Majesty having no further use for his services.
Mr. Bottomley, what has all this to do with General Dyer? I mean, with the specific case we're dealing with.
I have great respect for the committee, and I do not believe it will refuse to allow a minister or a government to unfold a reasoned and solid argument to its attention, and I am surprised that my honourable friend, who himself takes a not undistinguished part in debates, should not appreciate the fact, and should not be willing to facilitate my doing so. I was saying that that is the second method, in which the personal reputation of an officer is undoubtedly affected. The third method is of a definitely penal character. Honour, liberty, life are affected. Cashiering, imprisonment, or the death penalty may be involved. And for this third category, of course, the whole resources and protection which judicial procedure, lawful tribunals, and British justice accord to an accused person are brought into play. Those are the 3 different levels of procedure in regard to the treatment of the conduct of officers. Although my honourable friend has not seen the relevance of it, I think it right, at the outset, to unfold these distinctions very carefully to the committee, and to ask the committee to bear them attentively in mind. Coming to the case of General Dyer, it will be seen that he was removed from his appointment by the Commander-in-Chief in India. that he was passed over by the Selection Board in India for promotion.